FreshBaked, it's incredible how important this topic of who gets to go to Disneyland has become in terms of California residents versus out-of-state guests. Of course, Disney's position so far has been that it's California residents only. This is based on the Blueprint for Safer Economies recommendation per the CDC, no out-of-state guests permitted in theme parks. But last night, social media was abuzz. There's a new addendum to the Blueprint that seems to indicate that there's a loophole that would allow out-of-state guests to go to theme parks. That if an out-of-state guest is fully vaccinated, it is okay per the CDC and the Blueprint for them to visit a theme park. Per that addendum, fully vaccinated persons from out-of-state may visit or attend activities or events that are restricted to in-state visitors. The assumption is that theme parks fall under that category of restricted events or activities. But if you've been paying attention, you'll probably have noticed over the past year or so, since we've been going through all these guideline things, that theme parks have been treated a little bit differently. So it's not to be assumed that they would be lumped in this general broad category of events and activities. So it's naturally in doubt as to whether or not this particular loophole would apply to theme parks. Never mind that the buzz is also forgetting that each individual park is within their right to set their own guidelines as long as they fall within the guidelines set by the Blueprint and the CDC. That is to say, for example, if you're in the orange and you can go to 25%, Disney could still choose to open at 15%. It is their prerogative to do that. Likewise, if there's a loophole that allows fully vaccinated guests to visit a theme park, Disney could still say, yeah, but still, we're not going to do that. We're going to make it California residents only. Now, having said all that, the issue was in doubt whether or not that loophole even applied, but it does appear, as of earlier today, that this loophole does include theme parks, at least as far as In-Park Magazine's Twitter feed is concerned. They're reporting that they confirmed with a spokesman with the CDPH that it does in fact include theme parks. And SeaWorld is going to go for it. Now, they've already shown that they're going to be fast and loose with the guidelines. You go to their theme parks today, there's pretty much no oversight at all with regard to, social distancing or wearing masks. It's pretty much wild, wild west out there. At least that's what it sounds like when you hear the reports. Per SeaWorld, out-of-state visitors will be required to show proof of a completed COVID-19 vaccine or negative COVID-19 test taken within 72 hours of their park visit. By the way, there's nothing in the guidance or in that addendum, the new addendum, that references anything about positive or negative tests. They referenced only vaccinations. And apparently, SeaWorld figured that out and updated their statement to remove that, the qualification that you can have a negative test within 72 hours. Per SeaWorld now, got to be fully vaccinated. Now, for Disney's part, they're not going for it. It's being reported by Mouse Planet that they are not going to allow out-of-state guests, even with a potential loophole. They reached out to Disney and were told that they are maintaining the California-only requirement. Here's the thing. Disney's they're not interested in exposing themselves, a company of this size, exposing themselves to liability as it pertains to doing things that are outside of what is being stated explicitly in the guidelines, the CDC guidelines, and the Blueprint for a Safer Economy. Meanwhile, there's the issue of some who object to the optics of requiring a vaccination card before you can do, well, anything really. Be that, going to Disneyland or going to a concert or a sporting event. So rather than give the appearance, Disney that is, give the appearance that they are going to require a vaccination card, which, by the way, bad optics, they're just going to stick with their plan that it's California residents only. Not to mention the difficulty, the virtual impossibility that it is, really, when you in practice, how difficult it would be to check for vaccination cards. For example, do you make a guest show their vaccination card at the gate, or do you make them prove it when they're purchasing the ticket online? Tickets are being sold only online, so how do you do that? And then what do you do if you got a family coming in from, Tennessee? They show up at SeaWorld from Tennessee at the gate, and they're like, I don't know where my vaccination card is. Now, what do you do with that guest? Do you send them back to Tennessee? What do you do? Now, I have a feeling in SeaWorld's case, they would just let those guests in. As I mentioned, they're already pretty fast and loose. But is that a conversation that Disney wants to have at the gate with a family who just spent X dollars, buying tickets and traveling across the country to come to Disneyland. I don't think that Disney is interested in having that conversation or having that scenario develop. We saw something like that happen already at Walt Disney World with a guest who refused to go through the health screening. That blew up. All it takes is one, and it's a bad scene. Even though they're completely within their right to do so, Disney is completely within their right to say you can't come in. We've got this standard. You have to meet that standard. Even if they have that, it still looks bad. But having said all of that, the situation is fluid. Things could change quickly. Disney's position could change. The CDC's position could change. Disney could say, for example, they would just require more explicit language in the CDC guidelines or the blueprint, saying, exactly, instead of being vague about it like they currently are, be really specific about what a theme park is and is not permitted to do. Never mind the fact that, there still is that issue with checking vaccinations cards at the gate. That's not a thing that I just can't imagine anybody would want to engage in that situation. That is really, really difficult. Just as difficult as checking IDs at the gate. But in the end, I think this whole thing is going to resolve itself pretty quickly, whether or not we get the loophole or people use the loophole from the guidelines. I think this is going to resolve itself very quickly, as early as June probably. If the state does lift the tier system, then none of this matters. Whether or not you're a California resident, they'll just lift that, and California residents, Disney has already said out-of-state residents can come in if they lift the tier system, so we know that for sure. But I will say this, I do think that even if they do lift the tier system, Disney is still going to take their time. They're going to be patient with increasing the capacity levels. And some of that has to do with just having the park ready for guests. You can't just jump in at the deep end and think all systems are going to be run fine. There are a lot of cast members who are opting not to come back, and that's the reason why not all the restaurants are opening up, not all the dining locations. So keep that in mind as well. When you interface with a cast member at the park these days, it's very likely that they are a new hire. There's going to be a lot of new hires out there. So it could be a gradual process before we get this thing up and running to anything that resembles full capacity. But that's it, guys, for this update. I hope that clears things up a little bit. Or maybe not at all. Maybe it doesn't clear anything up at all. I don't know, but it's worth talking about. It's a possibility. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Fresh Baked.